Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to this interview in Women Leading Boldly Summit. I'm thrilled today to welcome Michelle. She is a Fulbright scholar and worked for the U.S. State Department in Croatia. So somebody who has lived abroad, a woman after my own heart. Her research expanded to Guatemala, where she recorded the experiences of war widows. In Poland, she learned from feminist leaders making systemic change. And after decades spent researching the intersection of gender and conflict around the world, Dr. Michelle is now a leadership coach and strategist. And she helps women navigate and change. That's also the important part.
There we go.
A system that is rigged against them. So, Michelle, welcome. I'm so glad that you are here.
Thank you for having me. And after that long intro, I'm like, well, let's figure out what this all means,
Okay, so tell us just a little bit. Just give us some background information into why you traveled, why you did what you did, and why you wanted to participate today in this summit.
Okay, yes, perfect. So thanks again for having me. I'm so excited for this and to be, with all the other folks who are participating, because we're just a collective, when we learn from one another, we're so much stronger. We're so much more able to manage life, right? So I'm so happy to be here. It's funny. So Karen, I tell the story that I was raised surrounded by corn, cows, and conservative churches. And a person like me would have never traveled. Like you wouldn't have ever expected that or gotten a PhD. I'm a first generation student. My mother did not graduate high school. My father graduated high school. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing when it came to academia. So people are like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And what I realized was with that upbringing and being raised by a single mother, what I saw around me did not match up with the things that I heard people saying about the way people were supposed to live, specifically women. Because if we had followed some of those rules, we wouldn't have gotten half of the things done. How would we have lived? So from a really early age, it became sort of almost like a superpower, right? For me to be able to spot what I consider the patriarchy now. Then I didn't know, but it was really like social systems, right? When people said, stay in your lane, do it this way. And I was like, well, but we kind of can't. So what do we do? So I was already kind of like taking a look at it, and it got me really curious. And something else that my mother did for me was surrounded me with encyclopedias and books. Growing up, we had probably like 3 sets of encyclopedias, back before internet, right? And I was always just wondering if these things weren't true for me, then who else were they not true for, right? And how else were people doing it? So I developed a curiosity at a really young age and always wanted to travel. And so then, as you mentioned, I applied for my Fulbright with the State Department in Croatia. Before that time, I worked in Guatemala with some folks doing interviews about microcredit projects for my master's program. And it's just really continued to expand for me.
Okay. And so I love it. Corn, cows, conservative
churches,
and curiosity.
Yeah, a lot of C's.
So it's actually 4 C's. I think that's amazing. Okay, so really interesting background. And so what brought you here today to the summit? Like what was the driving force that you said, I want to speak and have my voice heard?
The thing that I can no longer tolerate is seeing really high qualified women not working, leading, and living in those spaces anymore. Truly. We see too often that a highly qualified woman doesn't get the position or has to concede a position that she's so much more qualified for than potentially a counterpart. And the idea that leadership has to happen out there in the workplace too is not accurate either, right? We're already leading. And one of my degrees, one of my certifications from coaching is from the American Confidence Institute. And what I know is that my clients and the women that I've seen all around the world, right, are already confident. We're already confident. We're just trying to navigate and strategize with some systems that haven't really made room for us. And so when you talk about leading boldly, And then when I read also in the call, you had the word trailblazers, and I always talk about coaching trailblazers, right? I was like, oh, these are the people that I want to talk to. This is the kind of space that I want to be in, because I could learn from other people. But I also think we need to remember that this is also a structural thing, not just an us thing.
Yeah.
And we're really likely to do that if we're just sitting with our own brains, and not getting out there and hearing from other people.
And so I just want to come back to something that you said about women are already confident. Because it's not usually what we hear or what we say. There's so many women that don't dare step up or speak up or lean in, and so many women I find label themselves also as not confident. So I'm curious, why do you believe women are confident?
Because if we look back at our lives, right, and we look at the whole, we've done a lot of really hard things. We had confidence in certain spaces and less confidence in others. So what I think is that it's about noticing the brain science, which I know you and I are going to talk about a little bit more shortly, but we take a look at the brain science and what's going on and what works for us in these other capacities, right? And what is it that makes us think? What are the narratives? What are the structures? What are the expectations that make us think we can't do it over here, or that we don't belong over here? And I often hear it in terms of imposter syndrome, and I've given lots of talks on imposter syndrome. I've coached on imposter syndrome, right? But imposter syndrome happens when we enter a space where there aren't more people like us. That's where it happens, because we think, I don't belong here. I don't know how to do this. I'm not qualified. So when you are leading, you are probably going to go into spaces where there aren't people like you. You don't have a syndrome. Nothing is wrong with you. Your brain is operating exactly the way it's supposed to. We just need strategies to learn how to manage it. That's all.
Okay.
That's all.
So let's dive into that, because the brain science, I think it's fascinating. And I know that there's been so much research that has been done. So tell us, what is the brain science behind confidence?
Excellent. So, we all have an amygdala in our brain. It's that almond-sized piece right here, and it senses risk. It's like, hey, watch out. Something's going on, and you better freeze, get out of there, right? Get ready to fight, do whatever it is that you need to do. So as soon as the amygdala goes off, it sends that message back down to our brainstem, and it happens fast. It's so quick, right? So our bodies we'll sweat, our heart will race, we'll hear it in our ears, our throat tightens up, our voice shakes, our skin color changes, right? Those kinds of things happen. And at the same time, there are thoughts that go through our mind that are, nobody wants to hear what I have to say. What if I mess up? Oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. If I get fired, I'm going to lose my job. If I lose my job, I'm going to be homeless. If I'm homeless, I'm going to die. And we go from 0 to 100 so quickly with this catastrophizing. But it's not a problem, because your brain's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And when we know that, we can cut ourselves some slack and realize I can develop some strategies. I can implement strategies that, instead of kicking it all the way back here to the brainstem, I can push it back up to my prefrontal cortex, which is where all our executive functioning happens. It's where empathy occurs. It's where all of those really key leadership strategies live and operate. So I always encourage people to think of it as thinking with confidence, right? We might not always feel confident, because a trailblazer, we might be the first to do something. You're not going to feel calm.
Yeah.
If you're chopping your way through, a jungle, you don't know what's over there. You're not going to be calm, but you might think confidently, and okay, these are aligned with my values. So this is why I'm doing these things, right? This is my goal, and I know why it's my goal. So that's why I'm taking this action. And because I'm scared, I've also done some other things for myself to remind myself of who I am, what I believe in, that I've done the hard things before, right? And so we're bringing our whole selves with us, not just the new part that's really worried about this environment that we've never experienced before.
Okay. So I love that you normalize it also, because that is how the brain works. It wants to keep us safe. It doesn't like change. And so, but still, I find there are so many people that are still in that, I still, after 30 years, and I'll just put this out there, vulnerable thing, I still sweat profusely when I have to speak in public. And I love speaking in public. It is just a physical reaction, and I do it anyway. But some people just are, I think, terrified, or because they're overwhelmed with fear, or they're overwhelmed with emotion or some kind of physical sensation in their body. How, break it down for us and the listeners. What are some very basic steps? If somebody wanted to start somewhere, what would you recommend in terms of how they could start? Taking control of this and taking control of that part of the brain.
Yep. This is why I do what I do, because we don't have to go it alone. That's one of the lies that's out there, that if I'm strong enough, if I'm smart enough, if I'm a leader, I don't need help. We all need a wing woman. We all need somebody with us in our community, right? And so one of the things that I talk about is just knowing what happens in your body. Like you said, you start to sweat before you speak. Okay, I'm going to expect that that's going to happen. My throat closes up, which is so ironic, right? Here's my vulnerable moment. I speak all the time. I speak around the world, and my throat closes up. So when I go to, have maybe a hard conversation, or I'm taking a bigger stage, maybe I'm going in front of 300 people. I've only ever been in front of 200 people, right? And my throat closes up. I expect that to happen. It doesn't blindside me. It's not a sign that I'm not confident. It's not a sign that I don't know what I'm doing or that I don't belong. It's a sign that my body, my nervous system, is doing what it's supposed to do. So that's number one. You have to know who you are, right? Catch yourself, right? Be aware and expect that to happen, because it's only happening because you're doing something hard. It's only happening because you're a trailblazer. It's only happening because you're taking a risk. It's only happening because you're doing something you really care about. Because the flip side is, if you weren't doing those hard things, your nervous system wouldn't be doing anything. You'd be laying on the couch. Oh, it's comfortable, right? Or if you didn't care, you probably wouldn't be sweating profusely, or my throat wouldn't be closing, right? So and I just said throat closing. You saw me swallow. I had that very quick reaction. As soon as I said throat closing, I'm like, oh yeah, my throat's closing. But the flip side of it is, right? I care so much about this presentation. I care so much about this job. I care so much about speaking up, that the flip side is I don't want to mess it up, right? So if we're thinking I don't want to mess this up, it's because we care so much. Our values are aligned. None of that is negative. None of that is bad. It's uncomfortable, for sure. But it's not negative. Right? It's not a sign that anything has really gone wrong. And so there's so many other strategies that I talk about, including, you've heard this before, naming the inner critic. I mean, that there's so much research about that it normalizes it and sort of depersonalizes it, sets it aside. I also encourage us to think about, being also our own inner champion, not just think about the inner critic, but what do we know about ourselves? What's the evidence that we have? Not looking at somebody else, like the statistics out there, but when in my life have I done something really hard? So right now, I could think about business or working with clients in this sort of new climate that we're in 2025. And then I have to remember, oh my gosh, you know what? I was the first person in my family to get a BA. I did that. Okay. Yeah, I did do that. Right? And what did it take to do that? And learn from my past, because those are my starting steps, right? That's my starting strategy. And so keep going back to what works for me, what works for you.
Yeah. The way that I see it when I'm listening to you, it's creating evidence in your brain, for your brain, that you can do it, that you've done it, that you've done hard things. And also to normalize, it's also what I'm hearing is just to normalize. It is completely normal to sweat, to have your throat close, to, that your temperature goes up. I don't know, that you have to
Right.
go to the bathroom. Those are
Yep.
normal physical reactions. And yeah, I think just those two steps
Mm-hmm.
are a good foundation, or it's what I'm taking away
Yep.
is it into starting to address that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Well, and it's a practice because when you up level, you're going to need to not start over, but you're going to need to repeat the steps. And so sometimes my clients are like, my gosh, I'm in my mid 50s. Why is this happening? I'm like, you've just up leveled. And the research shows us that when we, take a new position in our careers, we feel more isolation. We feel lonely. And that isolation and loneliness then taps into that need to feel belong, right? And to feel safe. So of course it's going to happen. So I absolutely love it. You just said, you're going to have a vulnerable moment and talk about sweating profusely, right? I talked about my throat closing. I love that Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor talks about having imposter syndrome. Michelle Obama talks about imposter syndrome. That's so critical for us to see that it's not that these people succeed because of the absence of these feelings. They've learned how to manage them.
Yeah.
They've learned strategies, right? They've learned to navigate it. It doesn't mean it's comfortable. I'm sure it's not.
Yeah. And I think that that's the key. Is getting comfortable being uncomfortable and learning that I think it's not going to kill you. Those uncomfortable feelings are not going to kill you. That I find, I also had a conversation with somebody recently about, her perspective was really interesting. It was about increasing tolerance for them. And that the more you kind of do it, the more tolerant that you become.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I do, but I also don't want us to push to dysregulating our nervous systems.
Why?
That's something we have to be critical about, because then we're just going to collapse, right? We're going to be out of our prefrontal, because everything that we're doing here shifts us from back here in the brainstem up to the prefrontal cortex. But if we're like, nope, I got to do it. Nope, I have to do it. And we just get really hard on ourselves. We don't listen. We don't pay attention to whether or not the reaction that we're having in our nervous system matches the situation, right? Sometimes the nervous system kicks in and it's so much bigger than what is required for that moment, potentially, right? It's like we're needing to pay attention to ourselves and take care of ourselves. And if we are in complete dysregulation, we're not going to be able to think logically. We're not going to remember our core values. We're not going to remember this is science, and we're just going to keep beating ourselves up, and that inner critic is going to lead the way. And that's not a road to happiness and success and calm.
And I think it's a topic, I hear a lot about it in the US, not so much in Europe. Maybe I just haven't been exposed to it. But nervous system regulation, is it something relatively new? Have we just named it? Are we more attentive to it? Like, what's your experience with addressing that regulation now of the nervous system?
People are talking about it a lot more than they ever did. I think it comes along with the way notions of self-care have evolved, although I don't know that self-care really looks like the things that people are selling us, right, to purchase for self-care. But no, the studies on polyvagal system and, the biology of all of this, right, has been around for a really long time. But it is more normalized, as we've been using that word. It's, more present in social media. We're seeing people working on meditation and, all sorts of different practices. It's interesting that you say that you're not seeing it in Europe. I would agree, except I do have some clients in Europe. And so we do talk about this and they really enjoy it, but they've also said that they want more of it, so that they don't think there's enough conversation about it.
Yeah, it's something that I do with all of my clients also, that I find has been a game changer. But it's true. It's a practice. It's a habit. You kind of need to learn how to do it. But I think it's simple, and it doesn't, at least the way that I do it and the way that I've been taught is it doesn't have to be complicated either.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what's one of your strategies that you work with your clients on?
So I'm a positive intelligence coach. I don't know if you know Shirzad Shamin. And we do what is called a PQ rep. So it stands for positive quotient. And they're 10-second reps that take your brain off of autopilot and have you focus one of your senses. So it could be focusing your eyesight, focusing your touch, focusing actually listening to a sound that's outside. It's focusing on your breathing. But it's something, it's sort of like mini meditation, but you learn to do it anywhere. And that's why it's so powerful, is you can do it when you're sitting with your boss or right before the presentation.
That's right.
Or so it's learning to focus your brain using some kind of physical or using one of the five senses.
Yep. I do that too. Yeah.
I love it. So
me too.
Very, very powerful.
Yeah. Because I don't think we have to sit in this, right? That's the other piece. I just hear you say, and that I think too, that I don't think we need to take premature action, but I also don't think we need to sit in this for hours and hours and like figure it out before we go to a meeting at work.
Yeah.
Right. We can expedite it a little bit.
Yeah. Because I think for me, it was one of the elements that was missing with also my coaching practice. And so I've added it in over the past couple of years. Because before it was very mindset related, which I think is extremely powerful still. But this has been such, for me, an evolution and a game changer with my clients. Tell me a little bit how you do it specifically and how regulating the nervous system comes into play with your clients.
Yeah. I love it when my client comes on a call and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out. You'll never believe what just happened. Or I'm so stressed out. Something's going to happen. Or somebody will message and say, I think I'm too stressed for our call. I'm like, no, this is the perfect time. It's like, let's do it, because this is how we learn. Right. And so when they're actually in the moment with me, I ask them to feel the things, and we do it slowly because, again, I don't want them to go into a sense of dysregulation. But again, we're noticing it. And I think of it as data. That's how I think of it. It's just more information that we have about them as a whole human that we really put into the mix with their values, the things that they want in life and how they want to show up in the world, and along with the brain science. And sometimes when my clients don't believe me, I'll say, all right, do you want the gender research from all around the world, or to show you that this is, not just you, right? Yeah. That you are a unique human, and we're going to look at what's uniquely happening with you, but we're also going to put this within a larger context to understand that it's also about the systems that are out there that we're bumping up against. And so, of course, our amygdala is going to go off, right? When we're in the workplace. Of course, our amygdala is going to go off when we're the only person in the room who's like us in some way. So I do the both and, right? We go inward, but then we also look out at the structures that are around us and the kinds of environments that we're in.
And so tell me a little bit about that. What specifically would you look at with somebody in terms of environment, structures? How would that influence the person and what you do and how you work with them?
Yeah. So everybody that I work with knows something about the patriarchy. We just do. We have to talk about it because patriarchy, along with a lot of other systems, is just present in all of our lives. We breathe it. We drink it in. It's like water until it has a flavor. We're like, oh, wait, what's that? We don't smell it until we do. And we're like, oh, what just happened? But it's always around us. And so they have an awareness of that. And so when we think about walking into a room and you're a female director level position and you're wanting to get up to a VP, but right now you're feeling like you don't know what you're talking about, or you're feeling like you're judged. And then you think, why do I feel like I'm judged? And you kind of go down this rabbit hole. And we just have to pause there for a second, right? And figure out, okay, what's going on in the nervous system? But then why is it activated? What is it about this workplace? What is it about this system, right? That has you feeling like you don't belong, right? Maybe you're the only woman in this place. Maybe you're the only one, with your background. Maybe you're the only woman of a certain age in this space, or race or ethnicity, right? I mean, all of it comes into play. And so we have to just get really honest with ourselves about the spaces that we're occupying and how it does activate our brain and our nervous system, and then the way we show up. It's a whole package. We're whole people. We cannot just do the mindset And I don't think we can just do the body work. We really have to do it all. And for me, I also have to look at the structures, the social systems, right? I mean, that's what my PhD is in. And so that's what I bring that I think is a little bit different than what some folks get.
And could you give us an example maybe of a real client that you've worked with on how you would look at those different elements?
Yeah. So I can think of somebody who is, I don't want to say too much about her, but, so it's like in a firm, say, right? Like in a law firm. And she's the only female partner. And she's worked her way up to get there. And we worked together on getting up there, right? So it was how to create a department. Okay, now you have a staff. Okay, now you're negotiating your salary increase. Okay, now you're a partner. And each step of the way, we had to kind of look around and say, all right, you are highly qualified. You are very smart. You have evidence of your successes. So what is it that feels really sort of risky right now for you? And so then we would look around, and in that situation, it was pretty obvious, right? That she was the only one. And then I've talked with somebody else recently who's an elected official, and she was up for re-election, and she's, if I lose, what message is that going to send to all the other young women of color who look like me, who look at me and think that, oh, maybe they could be me someday. Then they find out, oh, I'm just like a one-time, person, right? I'm a one-time, like, was it a one-hit wonder? Like it's just this one time, and then I let everybody else down. Well, then, sometimes we carry those burdens on ourselves too. And then the risk factor, the burden increases, and it becomes harder. And it's because we're good humans. We want to lift and lead, right? We know that we stand on the shoulders of people who've come before us, and we want to be shoulders for the next generation. And we take that really seriously. If we didn't care, we wouldn't be feeling half of these things.
And we wouldn't be having
science.
This conversation.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And I wanted to come back also to something you said earlier about we all need help.
Yeah.
We all need support. I had a fascinating conversation with somebody today about coaching, and this is specifically in France, that is often seen as if you get coaching, you have a problem. And a lot of times your company gives you coaching because not that they want to fix it, but it's still seen. I don't want to say things are definitely changing. Definitely. So I'm a huge advocate also for taking ownership of your own mental well-being, how you are in your job. If you're struggling, get help. So it's from a personal ownership. So I can only agree with you that we all need help, but I just wanted your point of view on why you also think that's important.
One of the first things I say to anyone I'm talking with about coaching is, I may not be your coach. I'm not for everybody, right? And that's great. And I can help you find a coach who could be a good fit for you, but always find out if they're getting coached. Coaches need to get coached, right? We need to walk the talk. And I see coaching as resourcing ourselves. Athletes have mindset coaches because they believe in excellence. And most of my clients have a core value of excellence somewhere in the mix, right? If we were just going to do it all on our own, we wouldn't have half of the information. We wouldn't have a different way to see something. We wouldn't be able to innovate, right? And so I don't see it as optional. I just don't, because we have doctors, we have partners in life, we have, we buy food for ourselves. This is in that same vein for me.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. So, this has been absolutely fascinating. Is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you would like to put out there? We'll talk about your business and how people can contact you in a minute.
Sure.
But based on our conversation here, is there something we didn't dive into enough, or something you want to talk about further?
One thing that comes to my mind, and I'm using a US-based conversation right now, but again, I have clients in other countries as well. The conversation that I recently had with somebody was about slowing down, about really getting intentional and how when we say no to something, we're saying yes to something else. And she had this huge moment of saying no to something in the workplace. And she's a CEO. And it just opened up a whole other avenue of thinking and like connecting with like her private life. Right. And so when I work with clients, they think they're going to come to me and we're going to talk about scheduling and we're going to get this like going here. Right. And we end up deciding what are the things in life that you want to cut? What are the things that you want to keep? And you see how it's all connected. Sometimes people will come to me and we're like, you know what? Let's give your family a break from having this conversation with you and we'll have it here and free you up in other areas of your life, right? You're a whole person. And so I really am a big advocate for people slowing down and really prioritizing and figuring out where they want to say no because they want to say yes over here. And that's hard for women because we've been conditioned to take care of everybody's emotions, not ruffle any feathers, and saying no ruffles a lot of feathers.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. Because I think when we do talk about scheduling with clients, I say the first thing that you put on your schedule is all of your personal things.
Yep. 100%.
You come first, whether it be your morning routine, your yoga, date night, it doesn't matter.
Agreed.
You are more important than another meeting. And that's a huge wake-up call for people. They're like, oh my gosh, you're right. So it also comes... similar to what you just said, saying no to certain things, taking your plate off, taking things off your plate. Yeah.
And it's not easy too, because I've been working on it since the summer with my own cut and keep list. But I keep iterating. I'm like, well, let me move it back. Let me move it back. Right. It's very hard to say no. It's not an easy thing. And that's why you need somebody else by your side to help you out with it and remember the things that really matter to you and reflect that back to you.
Yeah. So I love that you finished with that because that just confirming to all of those listening, having a coach is extremely important and coaches have coaches. And there's a reason why. There's a reason why. So, okay, great. So if somebody wanted to work with you or get in touch with you, and of course, I'll link it all in the show notes, but how could they do that?
Great. So they can go to my website, michellemorkert.com, and there you can just click on the yellow button and sign up for a call if you want to work through one of your issues and, have a half hour together and learn a little bit about what coaching is like. You can do that. I'm starting a new program coming up that I'm going to launch pretty soon in time for Women's History Month, which is like my favorite month, International Women's Day. So it's like my birthday. Like, I just love it. So I've got a few things coming up, but for now, just go to my website or check out LinkedIn also because that's where I, publicize a lot of what's happening. And when you go to my website, you'll also see an option to sign up for my weekly newsletter, which is free, just comes to your inbox every Sunday evening. So sign up for that because it's a great way to keep in touch and to learn what's going on in the world in terms of gender, coaching tips, and all of that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you again, Michelle. This has been fascinating. And any last words?
Thanks for having me. And this is the time. We were all built for this moment. We just have to remember that.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yep.
Fully agree. Thank you so much.
This was